Hey everybody, today I wanted to go over how you can make a Playblast in Maya that looks somewhat decent. Trying to get these as nice as possible because kind of the defaults for a Playblast are pretty low quality. So first I just want to go over why we even use a Playblast in the first place and what that is if you've never heard that term. So I opened up a little bouncing ball project here. I hit play here, the ball comes in and does its thing. So now, at this point, if we were in a studio, we might want to bring this to, well, we probably should have been bringing this to our art director earlier, but if we want to bring this over to them, we want to do it in a Playblast because spending the time to render this whole thing out, if you're getting each and every frame, is going to take a lot of time. So we need something quick that can show our work that they can either approve or tell us what to fix, and then we can come back and do it. The other purpose of a Playblast is it gives us an easy preview of our animation just in case our computer is kind of lagging while we're animating. If you're working in studio, you get to the point where you have these very, what they call heavy characters that are hard to animate in terms of the computer actually processing everything fast enough so that you can see it. So how I just clicked play over here to watch this animation might not actually show us the proper timing of it because this might be kind of jumping or skipping or lagging or doing something where we can't actually tell our own timing. And as an animator, you obviously need to know your timing. So first things that we want to do is change up a couple visibility options. You can see that I've got like a directional light here that's shining onto my scene. I can see all of the rig controls for this particular rig. The grid might be something I want to turn off. So the show menu is going to be our friend starting. Click on show. I personally don't like to uncheck each and everything. I just say show none and then go back to show polygons. This will give me my basic scene. If you have anything in here that are maybe NURBs that are necessary to show, you would add those too, of course. And if you want to, you can even go down to here and take the grid off, if you saw where that was. And this will give us a nice starting point. Okay, right now I have my resolution gate on. I like to use this while I'm animating just so I can see what actually is going to be in frame. You'll see that I have this set to 1280 by 720. If you aren't sure where you can set this setting, it's in my render settings, which is this clapboard with the gear. And I've scrolled all the way down in my common tab, and I've said the image size preset is HD 720. I could do 1080p, of course, if this was going to be a little bit higher quality, but for this project, that's what I ended up using. Now, next, you'll see in our viewpoint, we've got some pixelation issues. I'm not sure how clear this is going to be for you to see, but I can definitely see on these lines right here that they're very jagged, and that's not the best look. So we have a few settings that are marked right here that will help us with some of those. So the one I'm looking for first is this one that looks like a circle where half of it's pixelated and half of it's not. If I click on this, that will do its best to kind of correct some of this. Now, this isn't going to be perfect. This isn't going to completely correct every pixelization I have. That's what rendering is for. But this usually does help things look a little bit nicer. Some other options for us, if you'd like, and just so you know, the descriptions show up way down here. If I hover over this one, this is our motion blur. I've found that this sometimes works great, sometimes doesn't work great for a Playblast. This one, I personally did not like how this default worked, so I left it off. But to give you an idea what that would look like, if I kind of scroll over here, you can see that this starts blurring things when it's supposed to be moving quickly. And this blurs things according to the lens. And I can kind of show you the settings in a second here. We have ambient occlusion, which kind of gives us some overall shadows throughout the scene. You can see I just have planes stuffed together, so it's kind of giving a separation look. So I'm not going to use that for this one, but sometimes that's nice. Shadows, okay, if we want to turn on our shadows, you'll notice usually the default for shadows is pretty dark, pretty harsh. So there are some ways to kind of turn that off, and I'm not even getting good shadows in my white floor here. This is our lights, okay? Another way to turn these on is just press 7 on your keyboard. I lit this specific to kind of get the Playblast looking nice. One thing I've noticed if you're using Maya 2019 or I think anywhere from 17 onward, if you're using the Arnold renderer, sometimes the lights in your viewport do very different things than they do in your render. So if you're lighting a scene, for your render to look nice, it might be completely overblown, overexposed in your actual viewport. So this light may not be your best option if you are kind of lighting everything specific to Arnold. But in my case, it looks much nicer. You'll see, you can actually see some of the textures that I've put into here. So I'm going to keep that on. Okay, now that we have some of these settings, and just so you can see where these are generally, and you can get more specific results out of these, if you click on Renderer and you go to your Viewport 2.0, you've got this box here, and this opens up your hardware Renderer 2.0 settings. So performance, you've got light limits. If I scroll down here, you'll see I've got my motion blur settings, so you could change the shutter to a different fraction to get a better result. The sample count is basically the quality that it's going to give you of the motion blur specifically. Our ambient occlusion, we can change the amount of this. You'll see it can be more dramatic or less dramatic. I'm still not going to bother with that. You've got all these options that you can kind of play with to get the results you're looking for. Anti-aliasing, I'm using the anti-aliasing for mine. The sample count for mine was looking pretty okay, but you could even increase that to go for a higher quality setting. So I think I've got everything pretty much where I want it to be. So the next thing that we want to do is look at our settings for the actual Playblast. So if I right click on my timeline, Playblast is the first option. They wanted to make that just really quick for you to access, because as you're animating, you might use this very frequently just to see how your animation is looking. So click on the square to actually pull up the settings. First thing that we see here is our format. Okay, so format, right now I have mine set to AVI. This QT is for QuickTime, and you'll notice if you do that, you have a bunch of different options for how that QuickTime will display. These settings, honestly, a little bit are going to depend on the computer setup that you have and what software you're running to actually play this. So I have found that I usually can get away with format AVI encoding none. In my classroom, we often have to switch to this IYUV codec. And once again, this just depends on what you're actually going to play this video in for these to work properly. My quality, this is usually a lower setting. If you're wanting this to look as good as possible, you bump this up to a full 100. Otherwise, if you're just looking at it for your own sake to see how your animation is looking in real time, then change this to something like 70 is usually fine. Okay, display size. You've got some options here. If you're just going quick, you can leave this to from window, and that would mean that if I have this window nice and large on my screen, then it's kind of just going to grab it from there. And a lot of times I have my students do it this way, where they'll just make their screen bigger so that they can view it just from the window. But if you use the from render settings, this should hopefully set it to what your render settings over here are set to. But you also can go to custom, and this is where I could just manually type in my 1280 by 720 to get exactly what I want here in my resolution. Scale, by default, this likes to half. It puts it at 50%. So if you do have, your 1280 by 720, imagine that this window is going to be kind of cut in half, and it will be a much smaller space that you're going to end up with. So I like to bump this up so we're getting the full size. Okay, and then down here I like to save this to file if I intend to turn this in or show this to somebody. But if I'm just looking at this for myself, leave that off, because then it's not going to save a whole mass of all these extra Playblasts. So I can click save to file. You can give it a name here. I'm just going to change the number on this because I know I've already saved a couple for this actual project. You can even hit browse and save them in a different folder. This will default go to wherever your project is set to. So if we set our project, in my case it was to this ball bounce project, so it's going to go specifically to those folders. And then we just run the Playblast. Okay, runs this, pulls this up. Okay, notice it automatically on my computer pulled up the video to watch this so that I can actually see it. But to turn it in, I can navigate to my folders where this is actually saved. So if I go into my documents, Maya, projects, ball bounce, and this goes into movies. You'll see that I've got several Playblasts. I even did one with a blur test here, but this is the one that we just did. So this is what you would turn in or show to an art director for a project. So there are a few other things you can do to get these Playblasts looking as nice as possible. You can really play around with some of the lights and shadow settings if you want to light this scene specific for a Playblast, but that'll give you something that can be nice and clean, and you can view it and turn something like this in for a quick critique, and hopefully this helps you get some better results out of Playblasts and helps you understand how that works.